Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I've got just a couple minutes until 3:30, so we'll get started right at 3:30. The bit.ly for the presentation that contains the links to different components today is on the screen. And again, I'm going to go ahead and mute and give folks some time to get on. We had a pretty high registration, but it looks like folks are still logging on, so I'm going to give a few minutes for us before we get started. Well, I have 3:30. It looks like we're just going to have some low attendance this afternoon, and I may stop a few times just to um, give out the bit.ly for the presentation so everybody can follow along with the link. But we'll go ahead and get started. This is the new administrator webinar for school level users. You may be a charter school user or a traditional school as well. Both traditional schools and charter schools are asked to fill out the survey. So this webinar is intended for new users. So just if you are an experienced user, you may be hearing things that you already know, but it's always good to listen. My name is Nathan Craver. I work for DPI, the Division of Digital Teaching and Learning. I do data assessment and continuous improvement support for the state. One of the things that falls under the data and assessment component is the digital learning and media inventory. And so we'll get started talking about that. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, feel free to put those in the questions section. Our plan is to go through some of the resources that you have for this section or for the school level, as well as go through the different sections that are required by the schools, and I will highlight any key points that about questions that sometimes folks have frequently asked questions about, or areas that sometimes seem to be a bit confusing for first time folks filling those out. So we'll go through that today. Hopefully we'll get through that. And we did the same webinar yesterday, had quite a few questions on the webinar. So try my best to stop along the way as you guys ask questions and address them while we're on that screen or while we're on that component. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the tab that says questions, and we'll go there. And I'll look at that as we go through. So if you have questions, put them in the questions section, and we will answer those as we go through. So again, we're on the bit.ly DLMI 2018 New School, and it is case sensitive, so make sure you are capitalizing the letters in there that are supposed to be. Sometimes that can take you to interesting sites if you don't, or give you an error message if someone's already used those. So again, this bit.ly is here. As we go through, I will continue to put that in the chat window for new users, but we will go according to that. So I have one person who is saying that they can't hear anything. From my end, it looks like the audio is working fine. You may have to log out and log back in again. And I know it sounds silly, but I always double check to make sure. I've logged into a few webinars and had the sound turned off on my computer and just needed to turn it up a couple of times. So if you're not able to hear, obviously, yeah, I got a note that says sound isn't working. And obviously, if you can't hear something, why am I giving out directions on how to fix that? Probably can't hear me do that. So I'm glad that the sound is working. I'm going to message this person who can't hear just real quick. And all right, so I'm going to continue to message them, see if I can help them. But when you're doing these webinars on your own, it's hard to have back-end support with this as well. So I'm going to move on and look at this next screen here. These are just 4 links that allow for you to get some information about this. I'm going to say rubric a bunch because I'm doing webinars on rubric and I keep going back and forth on the wrong title. But on the DLMI, these are the 4 links that you're going to need for filling this out. The first one is the data collection system itself. That's actually where you go in and fill out the survey. And if you can, and when you go in there, you'll see that as a school user, you have one section that you're responsible for filling out, and we'll go through that in a minute. We'll also, if you don't currently have access, I'll show you in just a second how to get access to that. I always do a quick update that allows that just make sure that everybody knows that the DLMI is considered public information. Anybody could call you up at the school level and ask you for the number of computers that you have, or how many teachers you have, or how many ITFs. That's all considered public information. There's no personally identifiable information in here. So it is all considered public info. And so this data is turned around and put out on a public reporting tool. We don't get a lot of requests for public information related to this, but if you ever do get one at the school level, you do have the ability to log in there, or it doesn't require a login, but go to that site and give access to that. So if you got a reporter or somebody who's calling you, or a parent, you can just give them that second link and tell them that they have access to the data there. It's a report that has every question in it, question by question, and it also has a custom reporting feature that allows for you to build your own reports as needed. The third bullet there is the user's guide, and the user's guide is a very important tool, and we'll go through that in just a little while. But that really is something I recommend having open while you're filling it out, especially if you're new to the DLMI. And then any tutorials and or resources that you might need are located on the DPI wiki. And we'll take a look at that again too in just a second. But I wanted to make sure that you had these 4 links. This presentation will be available for you for as long as you need it. And so if you lose one of the links or can't find your way back to it, just bookmark this presentation today, and this slide will always be there as well for you to have access to. Wikis are, as you guys know, wiki spaces are closing down, but we do have access for another year at the department, and we are working towards migrating that data. So just to make sure that for the new folks, just to give sort of a background on what the inventory is, back in 2015, we updated the digital learning media inventory and aligned it to the digital learning progress rubric. Before that, it was called the annual media and technology report. We decided to change that name so that it would align to the digital learning progress rubric with digital learning, but also wanted to keep the media in there because we know that media is an important component of this, and a lot of times the media coordinators in schools are the ones helping fill this out. So we wanted to make sure that we kept that word in there as well because we know how important that is to this process. However, when we look at this, one of the big things that we really tried to do in that update was to be able to make the data more accessible and also give you the ability to compare data to other schools and districts like yours. And so the data is turned around back to you with the intent that it's supposed to help local planning and decision making. If you were trying to decide, my school is going to go one-to-one and I want to look at other districts that have iPad implementations, I could go to the DLMI and pull up the schools that have that information there. It also is very important for us at the state level because it fills out the NC school report card. There are 7 reports on the school report card that are pulled from the DLMI. Those range from average age of media collection to number of book titles in the school to students per computer. Does your school have an actual media center, library space? Does it have high-speed internet access, and so on and so forth? And then again, we did create a new reporting tool to provide you with that data and to look at that and based on the reports that we created. So our first stop on this webinar is going to be, we're going to go out to the DLMI wiki. And when you look at the wiki, you have links actually to the inventory as well as a link to the page that shows you how to get in touch with your regional consultant. The main page that I do want to show you on this one, though, is requesting access. I get a lot of emails that folks ask about how do I get access to the DLMI. So if you're new to the DLMI, have never logged in, you're going to need to get your NCID, or if you've got a principal that you're working with at your school who's new to the school, or maybe a new principal, they're going to need to get an NCID as well. We will be converting this over to EdCloud within the next year, but for this submission process, we are going to require you to still use NCID. If you're not sure who that is, NCIDs are managed by the local education agencies or charter schools. So if you need your NCID or password reset, you'll have to contact the person in your district or at your charter school. We know a lot of times folks don't keep this list as updated as they should, so there are phone numbers at the top of both of those for people you can call at the state level who can reset those passwords. Unfortunately, I am not one of them. This is outside of digital teaching and learning, so I do not have the ability to reset NCID passwords. So make my life a whole lot easier, I'm sure, if I could, but unfortunately, I don't have that access. Once you've got your NCID, then you go into the DLMI, you log in, and you're going to request an account. If you are the person responsible for putting in data, then you want to pick an administrator account. And so an administrator account in this case means the person responsible for entering in the data. And LEA would be the LEA person responsible for entering in LEA level data. And then a school administrator would be a person at the school level. And then we have a special role for charter school folks who have to answer in the school questions. And then we have an additional section at the charter school that's similar to the LEA. So LEAs have 2 sections and charter schools have 2 sections. Just in some cases in charter schools, the same person has to fill out both sections. Once you subscribe, you'll get an email letting you know that that it was requested, and depending on what time of day you do that, and what I am doing and a few other folks, we generally try to get those approved within an hour or two of getting the notification. Especially this time of year, we stay pretty much on that. And so it may take a couple of hours for you to get that turned around, but it should be fairly quick. Just a reminder that those passwords do reset. And I will just say that principals, a lot of times, the only time that they're logging into the NCID is to sign off on the DLMI. So every year around the end of May, 1st of June, a lot of folks are getting their passwords reset for NCID. So just remember that this page is available for you to reference. And then I'll just show you a couple other pages. All of the webinars that we do on this are always linked on this tutorials page. So you can see this year's as well as last year's webinars. I've got a couple that I need to get updated or uploaded and processed to add for this year. We also have some videos here, just some tutorials on how to use different features within the DLMI. And then under resources, we have several different things for you to look at here. We have the user's guide, which I will open just to show you that while I've got you on the webinar. If you look at this, it's broken up into different sections. So if you're a school user, whether you're at a charter or traditional, you'll have to fill this section out. And so you can come down and click on leadership, and it takes you page by page, screenshot by screenshot. I've got 2 pictures that I need to update in terms of screenshots because we changed some of the wording on the questions. But all of the bullets are valid and provide you with some information on commonly asked questions or things that you just need to know about the DLMI and the way that it works. So this is here for you. If you're new, feel free to keep this open while you're working on it. And and just so you know, I update this frequently. So, if I start getting a question this year that seems to be a repeated question, I will add a bullet to address that in this user's guide. So just check back to it. It is updated frequently. So this is here for you to help, and try to do my best to provide as clear direction as possible when going through this user's guide. So jumping back into the wiki, the other things here, the code book is just a spreadsheet with all the columns that are available. So the way that the data comes out, and then the full question list is the 4th link here. So when you click on that, it'll force you to make a copy of a Google Doc that has all of the questions in the DLMI. And then this last one is just a presentation on the updates that were made for this year. All right, so those are the different things, and other things that we have on here are frequently asked questions, a link out to the reporting tool, and then you see this green tab here that says AMTR data. That is for data that existed in the previous version. So if you need to get access to your school's data from 2014 or prior, that is accessible there in the AMTR data link. So I'll go back into the presentation. And I see somebody's got their hand raised. If you guys have questions, if you could just put them in the questions bar, and I will answer them in the questions section of your control panel. And I'll make sure to answer those as we go. So the next thing that we were going to do is actually go into the DLMI itself. If you can, go ahead and if you want to log in and look at yours, that's fine. Or if you just want to follow along on my screen, I'm just going to log in. And so when you go to this and click on log in, there's a couple things to point out on this home page. Obviously, there's links to different things here about the rubric and who to contact and the wiki as well. But the main thing I want to draw your attention to is this account type and your name. Obviously, when you log in, it should have your name in there. But if you're responsible for filling out your school, it should tell you school administrator and should give you the role, and it should say school administrator. If it says school inquiry or LEA administrator, then it's probably not the right role unless you're an LEA user listening to this. But that should have the right role there. If it doesn't, you can contact me and I can adjust your role as needed. But that is should be your indicator there. If you are responsible for multiple schools, if you have more than one school that you're working with, say you're split between two schools, you're half time at each one. There's two ways for you to get access to both schools. One is to have two NCIDs and log in twice, or you can work with your LEA administrator and potentially get an LEA level access, which would give you access to multiple schools. That's a locally controlled decision. We can work with either one. It's just up to your district on how they want you to manage that. If you are a school level user, you should see the tabs up here at the top, school, and then you should also see reports, and those would be the only two tabs that you see. If you're a charter administrator, you will see charter, upload, reports, and charter profile. And if you're an LEA user, then you're going to see LEA school, upload, reports, and profile. So school level users, you just have access to the school and the reports. And so those will be the only two that you really need to get this completed. So since traditional schools and charter schools both have to fill out the same section, I'm just going to jump in and we're going to go through quickly and look at one of these schools. I'm just going to randomly pick a school down here from the Juvenile Education Services, because they are not required to fill this out like other schools are. So we'll get to look at a blank one and I'll show you a few things. When you look over here on the left-hand side, you'll notice a table of contents, and this is your navigation bar. This allows you to go between sections to skip around. You can always just go through it page by page, save changes, and go to the next page, but you can also jump around and fill it out as needed. When you look in your section, you'll notice that the section you're currently working in, all of the components of that are capitalized, and the other sections have lowercase, and then the section you're actually in is bolded. So I'm in shared vision. It should match over here, but you'll notice that I'm in shared vision, and it is a bolder shade of red than the others. So when we go through this, there are just three sections that the schools have to complete: leadership, tech and infrastructure, content and instruction. When you're filling this out, our recommendation is always to work in a team environment. You may be the one that's ultimately responsible for typing in the data, but that doesn't mean that you're the only person who may know the answers to these. It's very important to work with your LEA administrator, the person at the district level who's responsible for filling out the LEA, to make sure that you are not duplicating counts of things that they're counting at the central office and vice versa. And then the other thing is also important to know that some of these questions we ask, sometimes it might involve asking the principal or asking an HR person or things like that, and we'll go through those as we come through each of the sections. But you'll notice here, like on the first page, it says 101, then skips to 103. When I click into 101, it asks me, does my school improvement plan integrate digital learning? When I check that as a yes, then it gives you an additional question. That happens throughout the survey, so that if you're not required to answer a question, you don't have to either skip it or put in A. It just blanks that question out for you. So the first page is about shared vision. It's going to ask you about that. It does require you to put in a hyperlink. It will check that it is a valid hyperlink. However, it doesn't check that it's the actual page that we meant to go to. So please do put in an accurate link, and I'll show you later why that's as important. But we do want to make sure that that is a valid link. If you use NC Star, then just use the same link that you would give out to a community member or stakeholder that's asking to see your NC Star plan. It might just be the link to the NC Star login for observers, but put in that as you're able to put that in, or whatever you would give someone who requested it in the public. And then we're asking about your MTAC, SIT, or both, how you make decisions. The next page is on personnel, and this is one of those pages that is very important to work with others to make sure we're getting these counts right. How many classroom teachers does your school have? I always seem to open a can of worms when I try to define classroom teachers. But the official state definition is anyone who is, and I'm paraphrasing this, but anyone who is responsible for teaching children throughout the day. So that might include a guidance counselor. It might include a um, school media coordinator. But I would always recommend asking your principal or HR person for an official count of the number of teachers, just to make sure that you're counting the right folks. But basically, anyone who is paid to work with students and is licensed to do so, then we should count them there. Um, I got a question the other day about, like, what about somebody who works in a virtual lab for like NCVPS, or lateral entry? So if they're lateral entry and they're working towards getting their license, then yes, they should count. But if it's a classified person who's, just, an assistant in a classroom or things like that, they should not count. We're talking about, you know, certified teachers, who are paid to work, with students. And again, that may include your school counselors. It may include school library media coordinators or ITFs. That's just depending on how your school is paid for those positions. It may or may not include those. So that's a conversation to have at your school level. And then we ask about how many ITFs you have that are certified or not certified. Same for school library media coordinators and then assistants. This is one, if you have an instructional tech facilitator who comes to your school 3 days a week or 1 day a week, but they're paid for out of central office funds, we would like for you to count them at the central office. However, if they are paid for out of a school fund, that's one of your school paid positions and it's out of your school allotment and they report to your principal or someone at the school, then they should count as a school personnel. So this is one of these, the staff one is really important, that we don't want folks to duplicate counts here. Um, okay, so I got one question that comes in that says that their section timed out before the user finished and the data that they input got lost. So yeah, so um, I'm not sure. That's the first time I've heard that before. I guess if you do get up and walk away and then come back an hour later, that it will not. It'll basically kick you out of the system. So if you get up and walk away from your screen, definitely make sure you save the changes, especially on long pages where you may be working through different sections. So make sure you save often, and um, and do that as needed. So as you go through, obviously, just like any web application, you want to follow that same thing. So again, back to this page, make sure you work with your district person so that y'all aren't counting the same people twice. We are getting lots of questions at the state level about personnel and do schools have enough. That doesn't necessarily mean anybody's going to put money behind that, but I feel like that's where that question potentially might be headed. So we want to make sure that we accurately represent how our schools are staffed. So please make sure that that these questions are as accurate as possible. On the next page, we've got 110 and 112. 110, if you put yes, you're going to get a second question that talks about the amount of the fee. This is different than last year. Last year, we asked you to type that in. This year, we've got a drop-down menu, so your data should have pushed into the one that you typed. And while I'm thinking about that, I'm going to show you a school that has finished out the survey, just so you guys can see some things here. You notice that I talked about earlier the left-hand navigation being bolded. The other thing that you'll notice is that on the previous screen, they were all red, and on this screen, you notice that they're green and black. If your section is green, that means all of the sections have answers, and in terms of being complete, you could submit it like that. However, we obviously want to and updated. So what we did is we found, in order to save a lot of time, we pushed the data from last year into this year's system, with the idea that that you all could save time, and not, if something has not changed, you wouldn't have to update that section. So like here, for example, in question 110, do you have an annual technology fee? No, you didn't change that from last year. You don't have to go in and resubmit that answer and type it in again. So the idea was just to save everybody time, and then only have to update the things that have changed from year to year, because some of these things are pretty static in the way that that we do business. So the next section is on policy. I often get this question about policy. Why is the policy section all about media coordinators or media collections? And when you look at the school rubric, in the school rubric, that's the digital learning progress rubric, the policies in place talk about providing digital access to digital textbooks and digital books. And then also it talks about that there's funding, and basically leadership provides a method for schools to have media centers and the media center resources. And so because that's in the leadership section, then that gets added into the media center component. Okay, I'm going to jump back a page because I got a question in, and I want to go back and answer it while I'm thinking about it. So the question that came in was about personnel, and it said if you have a hybrid position where someone is a part-time tech facilitator and a part-time media coordinator, how do you count that? So you can put in decimal places, and that's a very good question. I should have mentioned that when I was on the screen. So if you've, like, for example, if you've got a media coordinator who's split between two schools, you can put in 0.5. And if you've got somebody who is split half-time, say they're certified as an instructional tech, they spend half their day as an ITF, you can put in 0.5 here. And if they're not certified as an SLMC, but they do that job anyway, you could put in 0.5 in the second blank. So you can do half-time positions or decimal points. So if you've got a media coordinator who goes to 5 different schools, you could put in 0.2. So just break up the decimals as needed, and we'll know what that means in terms of part-time. So I do want to jump back into the policy section. Yeah. So if you split between two jobs, then you can put 0.5 in both of the jobs you're split between. If you do half-time in a classroom, then you could have 22 and a half teachers and then one half-time tech facilitator. So any way that you want to use those decimal points to make that work, then do that as well. If a person is a teacher assistant assigned to the computer lab at a school, should they be counted as a technology assistant? Yes. So lots of personnel questions coming in, so I want to make sure I answer those. So we have 3 different types of assistants. Media assistant would be someone who is a teacher assistant assigned to the media center at all times or part of the day. Count them for the the percentage of the day, so half a day, 0.5, so on and so forth. An instructional tech assistant would be a person who might be, as the question asked, in the media or in a computer lab. It's there to work with students. Maybe they go through a rotation in there, but they're certified or a classified employee. So count them as an instructional tech assistant. And then if they're a classified employee that is or as a media, or excuse me, is a classified assistant type position, but they're there really to do the help desk or take in help desk tickets, then you would count them as a tech support assistant. So lots of different ways to count assistants there. But if they work with teaching kids how to use computers, put them in instructional. If they're there to really work on getting the computers fixed, put them as tech support. So back to policy. If you have questions, continue to ask. Those are really good questions. So the media center questions, obviously, if you have an actual media center, then put yes. The 115 is one that a lot of times we get a lot of confusion on. We're asking for book titles, not number of books. So if you've got 50 copies of Harry Potter, that's one title. So we're asking about variation and what is available for students to read, and how many different options they have in your media center, as opposed to being able to check out the same book, for 50 kids. That question is more designed to figure out what types of variation you have within the uh, media center. Then we ask about print and digital. Those should add up to 100. If they don't, you'll get an error message. Average age of collection is asking for the average copyright age, not how many years the media center has been in the building or what year you bought the books, but it's asking for copyright. Um, so we're actually asking for the year, not 21 years old, but the year that they were your average copyright year. So, in this case, it's 1997, and then the weekly circulation of materials. If you have Destiny, my understanding is that Destiny can run 115, 118, and 119 for you on the back end, and give you those reports where you just have to copy them over into this report. So school networks, 201 through 205. Occasionally you'll notice that 201 jumps to 203, or some sections in here have numbers that are not in order or seem to be missing. I mentioned earlier that sometimes questions can pop up based on your answers. The other option is that we've deleted a question, which in this case we deleted 202 from last year. So in order to keep the data to line up, instead of just renumbering everything, we just skipped that number to show that there was a question in a year previous. We're asking for copyright date. On the average age of collection, we're asking for a copyright date. So that was a question that just came in. When you look at 201 to 205, we want to notice that this question is often one that media coordinators just don't have access to. You know, our goal is for you to not have to go around and actually look up in the ceiling and count these things. This is one of these that is a school question because we need to know it for the school. But honestly, most of the time this is managed by someone at the district office. And so I would double check when filling this out to make sure that my central office staff does not have plans to answer these questions for me. As you see here, there's an upload feature. We have an option for districts to upload this report, these 4 questions now, for all of the schools at one time, and it can populate your answers. They may also just send you the information and say, these are your answers for these 4 questions, but I would work with my LEA administrator to make sure I have these questions right. And just because they should have this is all E-rate questions, so they should have this already somewhere, so you're not having to look this up or spend a whole lot of time trying to figure this out. So work with them on that. Same for this next section. What grades do you provide devices for each student in 207? If you do provide devices to some grades, you'll notice you get additional questions about how do you ensure them and if they take them home. And then for 208, it's asking you for the number of devices. We ask this screen size. I often wonder. So I do have one district person. I do have a couple district folks on the line. So I got a question about district level. It still has question 202 in the spreadsheet. You can just leave that blank and leave it in there, but don't have to answer it, and it'll upload fine. So if you have last year's spreadsheet, you can just leave your answers in and it just won't populate. So don't worry about that. Just use the same spreadsheet, push it in, but just leave the column 202 blank. And so just looking at this section, you're filling out your devices. We are asking about screen size for testing related purposes. Testing requires a 10-inch screen. So these second row are testing devices. So this helps us determine availability for online testing. And then we want to know which of these devices actually are the ones that get issued to students, because sometimes we might have 50 desktops in a lab and then 100 Chromebooks, and it's really hard to tell which ones are the ones that go to students. So tell us how many go to students and then how many go home. And then we did do an update back in December, as many of you probably know. This little section right here was new. We were specifically asked around some questions around policy that's being made, and some budget decisions that are being made around K3 and Read to Achieve, and some things around there about, what kinds of supports do we have and what schools have available. So the questions came in around really wanting to know how many touchscreen schools had, and what could be some things we could do to support reading at those early grades. So we had to ask some questions about how many devices we have, and what would it take for money to get us to a place where we could do some of these things that folks were asking about. So we needed to know how many were desktops versus laptops and how many were touchscreens. And then the same types of things go through here about staff devices. And then we ask about tablets as well. So tablets, and you'll notice tablets are the same questions here. That are same types of questions that are on the laptops and desktops above. I'm going to go a little quicker now through the last part. Learning environments, classrooms in your school. We're talking about spaces that are intended to be used for instruction. So not your broom closet, but potentially your pull-out room would count in that. Even if you've got an empty classroom, if it's designed for students and it's potentially that you could, if you got 30 students that moved in tomorrow that you might have to use that classroom, count that as a classroom. And then the next question is on peripherals. I got a lot of questions on these on Monday or yesterday when we did this webinar. Projectors are physical projectors that could be on a cart that you roll into a classroom, attached to the ceiling, attached to a smart board, attached to a Promethean board. The actual projector itself is counted in a projector. Document camera is the document camera that's connected to the computer. An interactive board is the physical board that goes on the wall. So if you have a smart board or a Promethean board, but it is an actual piece of hardware that gets attached to a wall or to a rolling cart, that is considered an interactive board. If you have a projector like a BrightLink or a smart projector that is interactive but doesn't require a board, then count that as a projector, but it doesn't count as a board. Casting devices are iPad or Apple TVs, Chromecast sticks, Kindle Fire sticks, Roku's, things like that. We know that there are computers and programs out there that allow you to just broadcast your computer onto the projector. But if you have a separate device that plugs in somewhere that allows you to do casting, count that. And then the next bullet, or the next two blanks, are for TVs and TV type panels. So if you have a television or a 60-inch monitor in your classroom, it should be counted as TVs. And TVs may be touch or not touch. So we want to see how many are non-touch versus how many are touch screens. So I did get a question: if a classroom has been empty all year, counted in 216. Yes, we do want you to count classrooms that, even if it's empty, that's an E-rate. We want that number to be as close as possible to what the count is in E-rate. And so I would always just recommend also asking, if you know who the person who does E-rate in your school, just ask them how many classrooms they count in their E-rate application and just put that number in here and do it that way. What about analog TVs for the TVs? If it is a TV that is used for instructional purposes, then I would count it as a non-touchscreen television. If it is just stuck in the corner of the wall and all it does is have a clock on it and it doesn't ever get used for instruction, then I would not count it. But if it is used for instructional purposes, even if it's still to show a DVD or a VHS, then I would count it as an instructional television. And then for 217A, what percentage of your schools are interactive? So if you have in your classroom a projector that is a bright link projector that allows kids to walk up to the front and use a pen or their finger, that counts as interactive. If they have a smart board, Promethean board, or a touchscreen television, those would be counted as interactive. So if it has touch capabilities in any way, shape, or form, it could be a smart table, it could be an alternative or an AR table. If it has a way that your kids can come up and touch and interact with it in group settings in front of the class, then count that. We are not counting, if I just have an iPad that I can walk over and touch, that doesn't count. But if it's a way that a group of students could look at this display and it is touched, then count them as interactive. But if you have anything in this interactive board or touchscreen panel TV, then you definitely have interactive classrooms, and you should have a percentage there. Technical support. Make sure you get with your district person to know the number of technicians. If you've got somebody who comes to your school one day a week, but they're paid for out of central office dollars, they should be counted at the district level. So this one, you would not want to include the 0.2 in that scenario. But make sure that you're working with your district person to make sure that they are counted and they are represented. So, again, work as a team. For 223, we want to know what percentage of your schools have internet access. We're hoping that you have, most, I won't say most, but a lot of schools do surveys at the beginning of the year to ask about this percentage. So we were trying to get an approximation of the kids in your school that have internet access at home, and we don't specify type of internet access in this case. So it may be a cell phone and it might be, dial up, but it's just internet access. And then access to digital content. I will encourage you on 401 when you're looking at this in a school setting. Yes, cell phones do count. We don't specify internet access. Can they get on the internet some way, shape, or form at home? Then they should get a yes for that. And if you don't include that in your survey and you don't have that, then just give us the closest count that you can. We know that that's probably just everybody's best guess, even if you do a survey for the previous question on outside of schools. So, that's why the ranges are pretty large. We're just trying to get a good feel for what that is. And nobody's going to knock you if it's 5% off for that. So just kind of get a feel for that. 401, I do encourage you, because one thing that I noticed last year was we had a lot of no's for this. But if you check yes and look at some of the things that are listed as alternate accommodations, my guess is some of you have them and maybe didn't see the answers and just assumed it was a no. But when we look at this, if your media center is open early and open late after school, and you've got kids that can come in and access the computer lab in there or get on the Wi-Fi on their one-to-one devices in your media center, then that is an alternate accommodation. If you have Wi-Fi checkouts at school, those little Wi-Fi things, then you can do that as well. Local community partnership might be something where you work with the McDonald's or Chick-fil-A's in your area, and kids can go into Chick-fil-A and do your homework. And that they can access the internet at that business, and they know that that's a place that they could go do their work and get on the internet without being harassed. Then that would be the version of a local community partnership. If you have you worked it out with a local phone company that you provide internet for free and reduced lunch kids at a cheaper price, then or whatever, then you check that low cost. And then central wireless would be like city Wi-Fi, where you've got buses that drive around and park that are available. So 402, check the box. And if you have some other method that's not listed there, please check other and let us know. This is one that we get a lot of questions about, like, do you know what other districts are doing? So that folks can reach out to each other and share the wealth around what folks are doing. And so for local community partnership, it's an intentional partnership. Yeah, so it would be one that you've worked out and it's something that as a district you would advertise. All of our downtown churches are open Wednesday nights from 4 to 6 for homework time. So that is one that the school has worked out and agreed to. 403, do you have ebook checkout? And then 404 is what types of online learning things are available to your students. If you have the free version, check free. If you use the paid version, check paid. And if you're thinking about buying something, just check that one. And then the last one is learning management system. Do you use a learning management system in your school? So you would check yes. And if you check yes, then you would check which one you use. I want to point out the validation section here. This section means something a little different than what a lot of folks probably assume it means. For validation, it's basically, do I have data in all of the boxes that are required for me to hit submit? A lot of folks want to use this as a way to measure progress towards completion. Since we push the data over from year to year, all of your questions should be pretty close to being answered, except for the new things that we added. So you'll notice that learning environments is black because they don't have an answer for touchscreen TVs. That's a new blank this year. So very few people have numbers in there right now. We just added that a few weeks ago. And so it's not intended to be like, okay, I'm halfway done. I've answered these three. I've updated these three questions, and I hit save again. It's really just a way to say, is this ready? From a programming standpoint, is this ready to be turned in? And then the last button is principal sign off. So your principal is expected to sign off on this. In some school districts, the districts have decided that the LAA administrator is going to be the person who signs off on this. We just need someone in that box to say, I have signed off on this and I agree that this data is correct, because it does fill out the school report card. And so occasionally we get a typo that makes its way through, all the way through to the school report card. And I will say that because it is such a process to update things on the school report card, if it wasn't something that was if it was just a typo, I meant to hit 20 and I didn't type in that second zero, a lot of times the school report card folks won't let me do an entire update to the entire report card for somebody who made a typo. And the reason why is because it was signed off at this level, and then the school report cards get signed off on before they get published. So once it's published out there, it's hard to get it to adjust. So I do recommend making sure that this is signed off on, because at that point, when somebody says, but I didn't know, or whatever, I'm going to say, well, such and such signed off on it. So please make sure that they're spending the time signing off on that, and are reviewing the data. If you want a copy of your data from last school year, so that you can have a paper copy in your hands as you're filling it out to make adjustments, the easiest way to do that is to go under reports, and then under school there's an export feature. You can change this to 2016-17, so that would be last year's data, or you can just leave it right now, and that's the most current version of your data. And if I hit download, it's going to give me a spreadsheet, and mine's going to have every school in the state of North Carolina in it. Yours will just have your school, or if you're an LEA user, it will have all the schools in your district. So this just gives you a quick glance, and then each of the questions in here are numbered with, I'm curious to know what, oh, that's total ITFs. I need to update that on the spreadsheet. I'm glad I saw that, and this one too. That didn't push over this year. But anyway, so it has each of the question titles, numbers there. So 105, ITF with, without. So it's sort of a shortened version of the question. And so you can just look through and it prints out your whole report, all however many columns, all on one screen. If you don't care about having a paper copy, but you just want to do a quick glance, you can click on each of these sections and it will give you your schools with the questions on the screen. So that's there for the reports feature as well. That's there for you. So you can download your whole report and look at each section, and then it's broken down for you as well. If you're only interested, say I'm the media coordinator and I just want to look at those media coordinator type questions, I can come in here and use the select columns, and I can get rid of the columns that I don't want and just keep the columns that I do. So you do have some ability to adjust this report as needed, and do that as well. But this report is here for you, and a lot of times folks don't realize that this is here for you to use, but it is. And so that is the entirety of what I wanted to show you from the logged in portion. We've got about 7 minutes left. I'm looking to see if we have any more questions. I'll jump back into the presentation just briefly. And so if you have any issues getting logged in or any questions that come up after today, on the slideshow and also linked within several different places on the wiki as well as on the inside the system itself, you can find these names. But my name is here, my email address. Kathy does the north area, Cynthia does the east, Jennifer is doing the west, and then Julian is actually out on medical leave right now. So if you have a DLMI question, something that you're just not sure about, you can email me while she's out, and I will answer those questions. It's probably just the easiest way for you to get the answer quickly and not have to try to figure out who to call. Just some final recommendations: use that user's guide, work with your district admin to make sure you're not duplicating counts, work with your principal and other key staff to make sure accurate data is entered. And we really, really do use this data frequently. I get phone calls of several times a week asking for questions about how many of this or how many of that. So I do a lot of reports that are put out there. So some questions that are coming in. So several people have noted that question 202 is still in the report. In terms of updating the spreadsheet, just leave that column blank. It will pull it in just fine. Or if you put data in it, it will also, oh, I guess my computer wants me to install something. That's interesting. Never had that happen on a webinar before. It looks like it shut down my Google account. Anyway, so sorry about that. Looks like I have lost my presentation. But yeah, 202, if it's in the district update, just put that there. Leave that blank empty and it will upload. And then question 401, if you the question 401 talks about our public libraries have internet access, but our school system didn't create that. Can it still be counted? If you're publicizing that as a school, hey, if you don't have internet, go to our local libraries, and the school and the libraries know that you're sending folks there, to definitely count that. Folks have that partnership a lot of places. And then the last question is this recording available? I will post this webinar on the wiki as soon as I get the processing done. It takes it, for whatever reason, it takes it about 30 minutes to get it out of the webinar system and downloaded to my computer. So looks like I may have lost audio. Not sure if you guys can hear me. I don't know if you guys can still hear me or not. My computer seems to be doing something strange here. But oh, looks like I'm back. I hope I didn't lose all of you in that time. Looks like my internet went out at the house for whatever reason. I work from home, so that seems to have kicked me off for a minute. But the recording will be posted on the wiki. We have a partnership with the public library. Would that count? Yes, definitely count that. So, yeah, sorry, I'm not sure what happened there, but for whatever reason, my computer seems to be doing something wonky right at the moment. But yeah, any of webinars will be published on the wiki. And if you have any additional questions, just let me know. Um, and if any other questions come in, I'll be glad to stay on for a few more minutes and answer them. But yeah, so definitely count your public library connections. That's let me get logged out and log back in here. But yeah, so that's mentioned in the question. So yeah, so like if that would be a local community partnership, or it could be counted under central wireless if it's provided that way through a library. Student data isn't active yet though at the public library. I'm not sure what that means, but if they're able to access the internet and get to, say you're a Canvas district and they can go to the library and get on your Canvas accounts or your Google Docs and do homework that way, I would totally count that there. So, all right, if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. This will be posted probably by lunchtime tomorrow on the web, on the wiki. And I will be around. If you guys have any questions, feel free to give me an email and we can set up a phone call or something like that if you have additional questions or need some one-on-one support. So I'm around for that and happy to do it. Just let me know. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And take care. And thanks for all you do for our kids. And we really appreciate it.